In this video, we are going to add the full contents of a feature service to our web map. Open up the add fs to webmap.py script from the map contents folder. In this lesson, we are going to use the content property from the map object that will help us add the contents of a feature service to our web map. The content property is a map content object, and from this map content object, we can access the add method to add the layers and tables from the feature service to our web map. Let's head over to documentation, starting with the content property for our map object. Here we have the content property for our map object, and it returns a map content object. This map content object allows us to access the layers and tables in the web map. It states here that this is useful for adding, updating, getting, and removing content from the web map. It would be nice if there was a link here to the map content object documentation. The link is back in the Python script, and I have it open here in the browser. So I'll switch to our map content object documentation now. Here we have the map content documentation. We can see here we have an add method. This add method allows us to add a layer or table to the map. There's one required parameter, and that is the item parameter. It is a required portal item, layer, spatial data frame, or feature collection to add to the map. The other parameters available are drawing info, that will allow you to define your labels and your symbology. Your pop-up info. The index determines at what index in the operational layers that the new layer should be added. And we have options here to overwrite the layer properties for the layer being added, such as the layer title, opacity, and other properties that we will see in a future video in this section. For now, we're going to concentrate on the item parameter. Let's head back over to PyScripter. Up top, we have our GIS and map classes imported. We first access ArcGIS Online, and then we use the content manager get method and supply in the WebMap item ID for the web map that we wish to add the contents of our feature services to. I'm going to head over to my notepad and grab my WebMap item ID and then paste it in. The get method returns an item object, and we'll assign this item object to a variable called WebMap item. We then create our map object from our WebMap item, and we assign it to a variable called WebMap. First up, we want to add all layers from a feature service. We want to add it from our NPWS designated boundaries feature service that contains 4 feature layers. Once more, we're using the content manager get method, and we need to supply in the feature service item ID. I'm going to head over to ArcGIS Online and grab this item ID for our NPWS designated boundaries. Here I'm in our FDM training folder, and I'm going to click into our NPWS designated boundaries feature service. You can grab the item ID from up in the URL or over on the right hand side. I'm going to copy that item ID. You can see here there are 4 feature layers in this feature service. We have SPA, SAC, PNHA, and NHA. Before heading back over to PyScripter, let's go into our web map. I'll open up this web map in a new tab, and we can see that our current base map has no layers. We'll head back over to PyScripter now. We'll paste in our feature service item ID, and we'll assign the calling of the get method to a variable called NPWS feature service item. This is an item object that represents our feature service. We want to add the feature service item to the web map. So we call our map object, which is our web map variable, and the content property. This content property is a map content object, and this map content object has an add method. We know it has one required parameter, and that is item. We're going to set that to equal our NPWS feature service item. Because we are using a method that directly affects our map object, we need to call the update method on our map object to commit the change. We'll assign the calling of the update method to a variable called status and print status to screen. So let's run this script. Our script is complete. Let's head over to ArcGIS Online and check out the result. Here we can see we currently have no layers in our web map. Let's refresh the page and see if that alters. We can see we now have a group layer added. And look at the order that the layers are in the group layer. They are in reverse order than they were in the feature service itself. The group layer name has taken on the name of the feature service. Let's head back over to PyScripter. We'll comment out our first example. And in our second example, we're going to add all layers and tables from a feature service. Here we are using our NIAH feature service that contains a feature layer and a table. We use the content manager get method and supply in the feature service item ID. So I'll pop on over to ArcGIS Online and grab that now. So here I'm back in my FDM training folder. I'm going to go into the NIAH feature service. Once more, you can grab the ID from the URL or over on the right hand side. Copy that ID, and we can see here that this feature service has one layer, NIAH locations, and one table. We'll head back over to PyScripter, paste in the ID, and we can see here that it says an attempt to add the feature service with a feature layer and a table will fail. Let's see that in action. Let's see that fail happen. Just like we did in the previous example, we call our map object and we access the map content object, and we use the add method where we set the item parameter to equal our feature service item. We'll run this script and we see we get an error. We get a value error. Cannot add a group layer with tables to the map. Please add the layers individually or as a list to the add method. So if there is a table in your feature service, you cannot simply supply feature service item and add everything to the map at once. Now you could do this in prior versions from 2.3.0 and below. We'll recomment out adding the entire feature service, and we need to add the layer and table separately. So we can see below here we have code for adding our tables individually, and we're going to do the same here for our feature layers. In this instance there's only one feature layer and one table. So for feature layer in our NIAH feature service item dot layers, so an item object that represents a feature service has a layers property that gives access to the individual feature layers of the feature service. Now we want to call our map object and access the map content object and the add method. We supply in our item parameter, which is our individual feature layer. Here we're doing the same for our tables. So for each table in our NIAH feature service item and the tables property that gives us access to all individual tables in the feature service, we call our map object. From our map object we're accessing the map content object and we're using the add method to add each table. We then call the update method for our map object and we'll assign it to variable called status and print status to screen. So let's run this script. This time around our script ran successfully, so let's pop on over to ArcGIS Online and check out the result. Here we are in our WebMap homepage and we can see our layers. We have the group layer and we have our 4 previously added layers to that group layer. Let's refresh this page. You can see that our NIAH locations feature layer has been added on top of our group layer. Our tables has also been added. Before heading back to PyScripter, I know I have one more layer to add. I'm going to go and grab the item ID for the county boundaries. So here I'm in the county boundaries feature service. And over on the right hand side I will copy the item ID, and there is one layer in here, county boundaries. I'll head back over to PyScripter, comment out second example, and for our third example, I'll paste in the feature service item ID. This is the very same as the first example in this workflow. We are using the map object, map.content.add method to add all the layers from our county boundaries feature service to our web map, and then we call the update method on our map object to commit the update. Let's run the script. Our script is complete. Let's head on over to ArcGIS Online and check out the result one more time. Let's refresh the page. We can see that county boundaries has been added on top of the NI/AH locations. Let's open up this map in the viewer. Over on the left in our layers, we can see that our county boundaries sits on top of our NI/AH locations. That sits on top of our designated boundaries group layer. If we expand that, we have the 4 layers from our designated boundaries feature service. They were added in reverse order. Click into the tables tab. We have our one table added. And you can see here we're getting this, an error occurred loading this table. This is a known issue, a known bug at the moment at 2.4.0. And I have it on good authority from Esri that this has been rectified in the upcoming updated version. At 2.4.0 it is a bit bothersome. We constantly have to remove that table and add it back in. If we go back out to our content and into our web map item, we can see that the last update that we performed on our web map caused our table to become a subtype group table that is not readable through our web map. We'll cater for this bug throughout this course, but just know that in future versions of the API that this should not happen. In this video, we added the entire contents of feature services to our web map. We added layers from feature services that contained a single layer, multiple layers, and also contained a single layer and a single table. There was a gotcha when a table is present that we cannot use the item object itself to add both the layer and the table to the web map. Another gotcha was that when there are multiple layers in the feature service, all layers are added as a group layer and the layers are added in reverse order.